Good day. Over the past 2 days, such rumors and gossip have been circulating on the Ukrainian sidelines. The office of the president is betting on the buildup of the Russian domestic political track, which will allow the Kremlin to capitulate. For these purposes, networks of Telegram channels in Russia continue to be created, and Ukrainian functionaries are already openly declaring the goals of the information campaign. The Ukrainian authorities hope that the reduction of support for the war by the Russian population and the liberation of Donetsk or Luhansk will lead to the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine. Demoralization. Support for the war in Russia is rapidly sinking. From the oligarch to the shoemaker, the thought is formed, time to finish. Politically and psychologically, Russia has not yet matured for real negotiations and the withdrawal of troops. But it will happen. Immediately after the liberation of Donetsk or Luhansk, writes advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine Mihailo Podolyak. Backstage rumors. On the sidelines, everyone is already discussing that the office of the President has begun to overplay and is too hot, that its task is to stir up panic among the Russians on the case of zrada, but thereby Bankova shifts the focus from her own agreement. Kherson was given to them for a reason. How much did it cost? Many, even on the sidelines, began to discuss the track, that if now it is not possible to swing the case of zrada inside Russia, then later, like a boomerang, it can already fly into the Ukrainian internal case, starting to pump Kyiv through the case of zrada and drain. Gossip. There were rumors that the office of the president set the task of the SBU to identify those who voted in the Russian referendum in Kherson and record a video with them, that they did it under pain of death and threats from the Russian military. Layout. The Americans began to pour zrada on the Russians in order to increase panic, lowering the morale of society anyway. Crimea will be liberated next year, ex-commander of the U.S. Army in Europe Ben Hodges. According to him, the liberation of Mariupol and Melitopol will begin in January, and then the turn will come to Crimea. Let's just say that such a scenario is possible only in 3 cases. 1. If the leadership of Russia itself gives up these territories, like Kherson, by exchanging them or something else. 2. If protests against the Kremlin and Putin begin in Russia, which will lead to his resignation and a reset of power. When new ones come and sign a conditional surrender. 3. A possible war with NATO will begin, and then, this does not guarantee such success, but there will be a risk of nuclear war. In other cases, it is actually not realistic. Rumors. The future problem of Ukraine is the financial support of the country. Zelensky at the G20 will ask for more assistance to Ukraine. But it is unlikely that his request will be heard. Especially, against the background of the story of corruption with money laundering, through the FTX exchange, where Zelensky's entourage and Democratic lobbyists are involved. Rumors. The office of the President of Ukraine has long been dissatisfied with the actions of the neighbors, who only pretend to wish happiness to Ukraine, but in reality, everyone pursues their own personal goals, up to the collapse of Ukraine and sawing its territories. In Poland, the idea of the return of Lviv is becoming more and more popular, which is taking hold of the masses. The celebration of the Polish National Day showed this. The office of the president has much to think about. Opinion. We can talk for a long time about the fact that there are no agreements between the White House and the Kremlin, but the latest news and leaks of insiders tell a different story. The United States does not exclude the adjustment of sanctions against Russia, said U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen. I think that in the context of some kind of peace agreement, the adjustment of sanctions is possible and may be appropriate, she said. At the same time, part of the restrictions will still remain, Yellen added. Backstage rumors. On the sidelines, there were rumors that Zelensky visited Kherson together with the Western press and personal journalists. Some journalists then began to shoot their own, and not Bankova's window dressing, for which their accreditation will be cancelled. The office of the president needs obedient hacks who do only what is necessary for Zelensky and his retinue. The accreditation of journalists from CNN and Sky News was stripped. Is Ukraine getting closer to Istanbul 3? Despite the statements of the office of the president about the inadmissibility of negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine, we are seeing the resumption of this track. Moreover, the Sullivan_formula does not imply for Ukraine the fulfillment of the conditions that Zelensky constantly declares. Today in Ankara, negotiations are taking place between the Russian and American delegations. This is already the 7th meeting in the last 2 months. Director of the Foreign Intelligence Service Narishkin flew from Russia to Turkey. The meeting itself was not announced in advance. Western media are starting to spin the narrative of total corruption in Ukraine, a problem that could cost Ukraine not only financial but also military assistance from its partners. It is noteworthy that in the first months of hostilities, the topic of Ukrainian corruption was actually banned against the backdrop of general support for Kyiv, but now it is being raised by authoritative media, concerned about where the EU and US money is going. Backstage rumors. On the sidelines, there were more and more rumors that the military case would now be frozen. Everyone is starting to prepare for the elections in Ukraine in 2023. Inside. MI6 passed on intelligence to the office of the President and the General Staff that the Kremlin is determined to get a military victory in Ukraine, which it will use to freeze the warriors. Russia continues to accumulate military forces on the Eastern Front and forms new strike groups that are not currently taking part in the battles. Rumors are over for today, see you soon.